Hey everybody, before I get started, I just want to mention a couple of ways that you can engage with me on a more personal level. I have a few avenues set up and I keep focusing on one, and I figured why don't I make a short little video talking about all of them real quick before we get into these episodes. So first thing, Patreon. There's a link in the episode description, in every episode description to the Patreon, as well as a video on the feed called Major Announcement that has all the details of what each tier offers and how much they cost. I implore you to check that out. I offer a lot of cool shit for my patrons. Second thing, the Discord channel. There's also a Discord link in the episode description and in every episode description. I have multiple channels set up there for each show that I'm covering, and it's a great way to just engage with me. I have a channel set up for MMA talk as well. I'm a big MMA fan, so if you're an MMA fan, you can check that out as well. There's a link to the Discord in the episode description. And then lastly, the Facebook and Twitter. Social media. Follow me on there. I post news on there. When I say news, I mean like, hey, I'm stopping covering this show. Hey, I'm starting covering this show. Let me know what you think about this. I do live watches of things on Facebook where like I'll check in and say I'm watching so-and-so show, and then I'll like live comment while I'm watching it, and that'll be cool if maybe you watch that show too and you want to watch along with me, or you're watching it later and you will see my thoughts, which are usually pretty entertaining because I'm usually pretty high when I'm writing them. So check out all those links in each episode description, and let's talk about this episode. Peace.
One mic, one mic. Yeah. All I need is one mic. One mic. Yeah. All I need is one mic. One mic. One mic.
Hey everybody, welcome back to One Mic, and today I'm here to talk about episodes 5 through 7 of Amazon Prime's Swarm. I'm going to be a lot more direct and spoilery with this video because, I figured if you wanted my general thoughts, non-spoilery, at least on the first 4 episodes, you could watch that video, the one I did for the first 4 episodes, and you're not going to get any spoilers, and I kind of do give my general thoughts on what I'd experienced up to that point and how I felt about it. But in this video, I want to be a little bit more open with my experiences watching 5 through 7 because it was an interesting one, and I also want to give a bit more of my thoughts on the series as a whole now that I finished it. So, episode 4, I thought, was probably the best episode of the series, and it was a great place for me to take a break that night because last night, around midnight, I decided to pick up the show where I left off with episode 5, and that break in between episodes 4 and 5 was very interestingly placed. Accidentally, obviously. That was just the point where I just felt like stopping that night. But episodes 5 and 6 felt very different from the 4 that preceded it. For starters, it felt like those 2 episodes should have been one episode. Episode 5, though, felt entirely like a waste of time because it essentially existed only to remind us, not tell us, remind us, because we already knew about this because of the scene where Drake got kicked out of the funeral, remind us that there was bad blood between Marissa's parents and Dre. That was kind of like the only thing that we learned in episode 5. There was really no point to it, and that's bad enough, but what's worse is it really wasted what I thought was a great performance from Dominique Fishback in that episode. And I'll say wasted because, a great performance is a great performance. It doesn't go to waste. But the scene where she's tearfully telling this friend this whole lie about meeting Nigel's mom and doing her makeup, and then she's like, we had this long day and we were just laughing and it was so great and it was perfect and we were best friends. Like this whole thing, she's tearful. She's crying, telling about this moment that is like the most magical moment of her life. And it's all a fucking lie. We know it is anyway. And it's a great performance and a great scene in an episode that felt entirely pointless on a show that doesn't even really have an important message. And I'm like, and again, like a great performance does not go to waste at all. A great performance is a great performance. But I watched that scene and I'm like, wow, what a great scene. But that was a really great scene and it was a lot for a show that seems to only exist to poke fun at Beyonce's fans. It's like on one hand, the show feels like it wants to kind of just be something that you just watch and have a good time with. Like, oh man, this is a crazy character, this Dre character. This is fun. You can sit back, smoke, have a drink, watch some wild shit and have a good time. Then other times it feels like it really wants to swing for the fences creatively and do some really strong stuff, which I appreciate that, but it just feels like at times when you have an episode that feels almost like, I don't want to say like a joke, but like it feels kind of like they're not really going for anything special. It doesn't really feel like it serves any real purpose. It's only like 20 something minutes long, and then you insert this really great scene into it. It just feels so misplaced, and I feel like it kind of took a little bit of the wind out of that scene to have it in an otherwise meaningless and pointless feeling episode. I don't know. Like I don't want to say it felt like a wasted performance, but it just felt like a performance that would have been more impactful had it been placed somewhere else. I think that's probably the best way to put it. And then episode 6 does finally give us the information that the show has been alluding to this whole time, but is buried within this, like, I don't know, like this unsolved mysteries type show kind of deal. And it feels that way, but the episode actually tells us that the show we're watching, Swarm, is the actual unsolved mysteries type show, and that this episode is the actual people that we're seeing. Because there's a small scene at the end where we see Donald Glover, the actual Donald Glover, talking about like, oh yeah, I got this show that I'm making called Hive, and he lists the people who are in it, like talking to Chloe Bailey, I'm talking to Damson Idris. And so they make it seem like the show that we're watching is the recreation, and this episode that we're watching is the actual reality. And it's an interesting swing at doing something creative, but it feels like yet another episode of Atlanta that's found its way onto this show. But this feels like the times when Atlanta takes the big swings and misses. So like, you don't need to bring that aspect of Atlanta into the show. And like, so in this episode, we watch this cop, and she's following this trail of clues that eventually lead her to tie Dre to all the deaths that Dre has done. But this cop character is like, I don't know, like overly like buffoonish this whole time. Like, I don't know. It seems like she's really hamming it up. Like she's not, like, this doesn't seem like a police officer working a case. It seems like someone who is doing like a stage performance of a cop working a case. I don't know if that makes sense, but like, it feels like this woman is acting per se. Doesn't feel like I'm watching a cop investigating a case, which fed into the whole thing of me watching the recreation and not Swarm being the recreation. And if that's the point, to kind of subvert that and to be like, Swarm is the recreation, that the juice wasn't worth the squeeze. Like that whole episode, like I didn't need that. If all I was gonna get from it was that little twist at the end, like see, the Swarm is the fake show. Like, I don't know, man. It just felt like that whole episode was like a parody of an Unsolved Mysteries kind of show, because this cop character was so weird. And I'm just like, why would I think that this is supposed to be the quote unquote reality when this cop character, like I said, it feels like a performance. It doesn't feel like I'm watching a cop investigate a case. Like the way she's constantly doing this overly boisterous laugh, I'm just like, I don't know, it felt too, I don't know, everything here in this episode just felt really misplaced and odd. And this is an area where Atlanta struggled with late too. When I say late, I mean like season 4. They do these episodes that felt like standalone episodes, and then when nobody liked them, the critics and everybody is like, well, you just didn't like it because it was different and they tried something new and you just want to see the main cast. And no, I didn't like it because every time Atlanta strayed from what Atlanta does well, it wasn't good. Like, not every time, but like several times it wasn't good. Sometimes it was great. I'd say like half and half. Sometimes they knocked it out of the fucking park. Sometimes the episode wasn't good. But that's what's happening here. This show strayed from what it had been doing well to this point to try to be an episode of Atlanta, and it tried to be an episode of Atlanta that Atlanta struggles to even do well. So it's like, I don't know, episode 6 didn't work for me, and then you have episode 5, which felt like a waste of time, and it just kind of felt like we sat through the full runtime of episodes 5 and 6 to find out at the end of episode 6 that she was a foster child in Marissa's family, and she stabbed someone, and they could have just combined these two mediocre episodes into one episode, stripped away like 15 minutes of the goofiness from episode 6, and now you have one good episode instead of 2 mediocre ones. And that's just that, like, and that's why I say it's interesting that I inadvertently chose to take that break in between 4 and 5, because it was like I started watching 5 and 6, and I'm like, I don't even like this show right now. Like, well, like, this is okay, but I'm like, this isn't like what I enjoyed in episodes 1 through 4. And even though episodes 1 through 4 even tried to kind of feel like different shows at times, it never strayed as far as episode 6 did. And episode 6 was, again, like I said, it's the kind of show, it's the kind of episode that Atlanta goes for that Atlanta can't even get right. So it's like, it's the same thing. It's not, oh, this is different, I don't like. Like, I'm not one of those people who's like, ooh, change bad, like automatically just because it's different. Like, I don't operate in that way. I didn't like it because it wasn't good. Like, it wasn't entertaining. Like, that's how I feel about some of those Atlanta episodes, and that's how I feel about this 6th episode. So let's see. It's at this point, this is a good moment to kind of move into a different topic. It's at this point that I came to the realization that I think that this show isn't trying to be some great prestige drama or whatever, and we're watching it and like all the reviewers are like, oh, what a great, like, it's not trying to be Atlanta from that side of things. Because like I said in my episode 1 through 4 video, I felt like even when Atlanta struggled, it was always trying to do something important. And I feel like this show's not trying to do anything important. It's just trying to entertain, which is fine. Absolutely not a critique. But that's when I realized that I feel like this show is really just like, you got a bunch of creative people, you give them a bunch of money to make the kind of content that they want, and they said, let's make a show where we take these extreme fandoms to their actual fucking extremes. It'll be a fucking lark. We're gonna laugh. We're gonna do all kinds of fun shit. They probably smoked a bunch of weed, came up with all these great individual moments, like these ideas and these concepts, like the moments that we see, like the scene in episode 2 or 3, the one with Paris Jackson, where they do the log thing of the kicking of the body over and over. I alluded to this scene in my video. Like, they probably had an idea like that. Like, yeah, we'll have a scene where they just kick somebody for a really long time. Whatever. Come up with all these great ideas. Remember that they fully have the talent and the money to do them, and they did it. Like, it felt like a passion project. Like, and I want to be clear, this isn't a criticism. It, like, every show or film doesn't need to be made with the goal of winning awards. I'm just making an observation of what I think this show is, and for what it's worth, I think they did it really fucking well. Like, I enjoyed this series. So, like, even though I'm kind of shitting on episode 6 and 5 and 6 collectively as something that I didn't particularly care for, I do think that this show did what it was striving for very, very well. It just, I don't know. It took me a moment to understand and accept. And I wasn't like, I didn't have negative thoughts on the series leading up to this point, but at the point around episode 6 is when I realized, like, okay, they're just like, this is really just people who are really creative with a lot of money making a show for themselves that's fun. And that's all this is, and I don't need to really be looking for anything more than that. It's just, if you're looking for something with some sort of profound messaging, you're probably not going to find it here. But this is just going to be a good time. And, well, speaking of good times, this feels like a good time to segue into talking about episode 7, because even though I said this show doesn't feel like it wants to be prestigious like 2 seconds ago, it took some very big swings in episode 7, and a lot of them worked. And episode 7 showcases this burgeoning relationship between Dre and a new character we meet. We meet new characters every week, Rashida. Dre is now very much in her butch bag, and she starts dating Rashida throughout the course of this episode. Like, we see this relationship form from start to finish here. And the point here is to show, I think at this point, how perfect Dre's life is. She has someone who loves her for her and is truly understanding. Her parents are almost like too perfect to be real, which, side note, I like the fact that the folks behind Atlanta managed to bring back in Cree Summer again. That was pretty cool. We watch this wonderful relationship build. We see Dre seem to be truly happy and in the absolute most ideal circumstances. So, like, everything seems perfect for Dre. But then we learn the lesson that Dre's obsession is always going to be her downfall. She buys front row tickets to Nyjah for her and Rashida completely goes off on her, talking about how much she hates Nyjah, how she works 2 jobs to support her and Dre, when Dre is spending $4,000 on tickets to see a motherfucker she don't even like. Like, you don't even fucking listen. She's like, can you get tickets to her sister? Because then at least I would know you listen to me. Like, that was cold. She said she's had to, like, ask her parents for money. Like, everything, she just completely snaps. And you could tell what we haven't seen throughout this episode was Rashida burying, like, resentment and anger toward, like, everything could be perfect. We could be living this perfect life, but she won't let this Nyjah shit go. And she just lets all that go for her. This is a great performance by this actress as well. I know her name, too. It's, like, starts with a K. I know this actress. But she was incredible in this episode. And I think really it's easy to miss that, too, because what Dominique Fishback has continued to do is incredible. And I talked about this in episodes 1 through 4 video, but Dominique Fishback, like I said, she's kind of like my, it's weird to call her Rookie of the Year because she's done a lot of work, but like kind of like that person that it's like everybody's still kind of sleeping on her and you know she's gonna be a big fucking deal one day. She's that. And you know, it kind of, like when you're sharing a screen with somebody who could perform in the manner that Dominique can, it was great to see. Oh man, I really hate that I can't remember her name that starts with a K. How great she was in her scenes with Dominique as well. But what ends up happening, after Rashida shits on Dre snaps and kills her as she is prone to do, minus the because we didn't need it, the Who's Your Favorite Artist setup. And Dominique Fishback just continues to crush this show because in this great scene, she's strangling Rashida like through tears and telling her she loves her. Then I don't remember if it like smash cut or if it kind of like took a moment, but like then it has this cut to this shot of them just, it looks like they're like just sleep on the couch, but you know that Rashida's dead. And it's such a sick fucking shot, such a great scene. And that's the kind of shit that this show goes for, that when it works really well. And that it's, again, just like Atlanta. I was saying this all season 4 about Atlanta. When you go for it and it works great. When you go for it and it doesn't, it kind of bombs pretty hard. But what ends up happening is Dre burns the body, and then she realizes that the front row concert ticket she spent $4,000 on were in the pocket of the body she just burned. So, of course, she has to kill a scalper to still get into this concert. And then we see Dre walk up on the stage in the middle of the concert. And then things get kind of blurry. And we've seen this happen with Dre before. And she's approached by Nyjah, but it has Marissa's face, Chloe Bailey's face. It looks like a bad deep fake. Like a good deep fake would have just looked, it just would have looked like Chloe Bailey. This looked like a deep fake. And then we see her and Nyjah leaving together. And I love an ending that's open to interpretation. And I think that this one is, and I'm curious to know what you guys think happened here. Because I think we can all agree that she did not likely befriend Nyjah on stage in the middle of a show, and then they left together and were just and drove away together in a car. She cried in Nyjah's arms. Like I think we can agree that's probably not what happened. So here's my take. We've already seen Dre get into these modes where she essentially hallucinates, right? Think of the scene in the club where she's biting this. What was that black fruit? It looked like almost like a black. Like a what's the little oranges, tangerines, like one of those but black. And we see her biting that, and we learned that she actually ended up biting Nyjah. That was ridiculous in a good way. Like that was one of those things. Like that's what happened. But think about how that scene was filmed, right? It was all blurry, and they kind of like bled in these images of Nyjah in with whatever that fruit was as she was biting it. So when they said that, oh, did she bite Nyjah? It made sense because even watching that scene, I'm like, why is like Nyjah's chin kind of like like diffused into this fruit, right? And then now think about this scene, the scene at the end of episode 7. The same technique was used when Dre was getting on stage, the blurry, wavy kind of hallucinogenic kind of vibe to it. And we see Nyjah has, again, like I said, Marissa's face, right? Then we see Nyjah and Dre leaving with their heads down, like covering their faces, like they're hiding from paparazzi. Like, oh, we got to get out of here because, you know, Nyjah's famous and so am I because I'm with her. And they get in the back of a car with a surprisingly small amount of backseat space for someone who's supposed to be Beyonce. My thought is that she hallucinated Marissa's face on the stage and essentially did something that got her arrested. That way, I mean, the way she's being taken out kind of mirrors like how they do a perp walk. Like, so when you see it with Beyonce, with Nyjah, you're gonna default to like, paparazzi. But doesn't that also kind of look like somebody who's involved in a high profile murder or something when they're being brought into court? Is that not how they kind of like bring them in so that the press can't like be on their face? Sometimes they put like a coat over the person's head. Like it felt like a perp walk kind of. Then that small back seat of the car was probably a police car. Because, like, if you get in the back seat of a car with someone who's supposed to be Beyonce, you're going to be in the back of some shit with a whole lot of fucking space, not whatever the fuck that was. Like, that... As someone who has been in the back of a police car, I can tell you, from experience, not a lot of room in there. But then, my interpretation of this scene also makes more sense if you pull in the end of episode 6 to think about that as well, right? Because episode 6 is with that cop saying, maybe she's like, I would love to talk to Dre. Maybe I could talk to her at a Nyjah concert. And speaking of which, why did they blur out Nyjah's name throughout that entire episode? So I need to look to make sure I remember where I'm leaving off here, because I want to make this point before I forget it. Watching that episode, I thought, I'll go, okay, maybe you bleep out Nyjah's name for whatever reason, because again, I'm thinking I'm watching the Unsolved Mysteries type show, right? And they're just bleeping out Nyjah's name because, we're keep bleeping out the real names. But then when you have the Donald Glover thing at the end, and you realize that Swarm is the fictional property that's been made, and what we have been watching was supposedly the real people. Why would you bleep out the real name in the real thing, especially if the person's supposed to be Beyonce? Everybody gonna know who the fuck that is anyway within this world. Like, everybody's gonna know who Nyjah is. So if you bleeping out, like, the Dre ran up and beep, and bit beep on the chin or whatever, like anybody watching that is be like, okay, that's Nyjah, because I remember when that story came out, a Nyjah getting bit on the face. Like, so beeping out Nyjah's name makes less sense when you make that episode 6, the most of it, that make that the reality, and Swarm is the reenactment. Like, now bleeping out the name don't make as much sense. So I thought that was like a weird thing. I don't know, but anyway, where was I? So like I said, it ends with the cop saying, episode 6 ends with the cop saying, like, I want to talk to Dre. Maybe I can run into her at a Nyjah concert. Then she gets a call saying that they found Dre in jail for going on stage at a Nyjah concert. And then she's like, oh, she's going by Tony now. And they make the joke where, like, the person looks at her and is like, is this her brother? And it's like, no, that's her. And she's like, she's going by Tony now, which is true. She goes by Tony in episode 7. And then she says, I'm going to go to Atlanta and try and talk to her. So it's plausible that she was at the concert in episode 7 where Dre goes up on stage and the whole Marissa thing happens, and that she's the one that arrests Dre and is taking her out with, covering the face and shit like that. So that's what I think happened here. But I think it was one more point I wanted to make about episode 6 and I remember now. I went back to look at episode 6, right? And in this scene where the cop's talking about, she was arrested in Atlanta for going up on stage, they show video of that arrest. And I thought, like, wait, is this the arrest that happens in episode 7? But the person that's supposed to be Dre has on entirely different clothes than Dre has on in episode 7. So throw that out. I just wanted to make that point. But all in all, though, I thought this was a really good, really fun series. Aside from episodes 5 and 6, every episode was really enjoyable. As you would expect from a Donald Glover produced series, it took some big creative swings, and they were successful the vast majority of the time. But unfortunately, also like Atlanta, sometimes those big swings were misses, which would be episode 6 mostly. And I'd also, if I were, I don't even like the phrase "if I were Donald Glover." It's like I'm putting myself, I feel like I'm elevating myself way beyond who the fuck I am. But I'd be wary of everything that he makes that feels like Atlanta. Or if I were him, I'd be wary of making anything else that feels like Atlanta. Like, I feel like his next thing should be something that feels entirely different from anything else he's ever done. Like, a good example is like Quentin Tarantino, right? Quentin Tarantino has a very distinct style of filmmaking and writing. But none of his movies are the same. Like, you got a fucking slave movie, you got a fucking Nazi war movie, you got fucking Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Like, he hits like all these different genres, right? But he still keeps his distinct style in each thing, but everything is different. I'd like to see that from Glover, especially because we know he can do it. Like, we don't need to have Atlanta and then a different kind of Atlanta and then a different kind of Atlanta. This is the same guy. He wrote 30 Rock. He wrote Community. He can do comedy. We know he can do this kind of shit. Maybe he could make a fucking horror, like an actual horror movie. Like, there's so many different things I'd like to see him do that don't feel like Atlanta. Like, I want to see him do something a little bit different. That's all. But yeah, I think I can wrap this one up. You guys can let me know what you thought in the comments. Oh, I did forget to mention that it's interesting that Dre goes by a different name in every episode. I didn't notice. Like, never is she the same person twice. But I mean, but for someone as crazy as her, that would make sense, right? To change your name all the time. But Let me know what you thought about this episode in the comments. Again, I'm sorry, not Habit. Let me know what you thought about this show in the comments. I will see you guys whenever I do a thing again. I don't know. The next thing I got going on is, let's see, what's today? Saturday. I'll have a fight talk coming to the Patreon, going over the last 3 UFC events. Let's see, The Last of Us is over. So yeah, probably Perry Mason on Tuesday might be the next thing. I'm gonna have some stuff coming on the Patreon, probably on Monday. And then we got Yellow Jackets coming up, Succession coming up. We got a whole lot of good shit. So I'll see you guys then, and until then, peace.